Says I'm treading the water and feels like it's getting deep. Some nights I drown in the weight of the things that I think I need. Sometimes I feel complete. Yeah. You always say to me, oh, you say someday when we're older we'll be shining like we're gold, yeah, won't we? Won't we? Someday when we're older I'll be yours and you'll be mine, be happy, happy. Oh, you say someday when we're older we'll be worried about the things that we don't need. We don't need. One day down the line before we both run out of time, we're gonna see. Someday we'll be all that we need. Someday we'll be all that we need. Been the best, been the worst, been a ghost in a crowded room. Took a chance, took a turn, took a dive, and it led to you. Many times that I wished I could be anywhere but here. So many times that I wish I could see what you see so clear, so clear. Oh, you say someday when we're older we'll be shining like gold, yeah, won't we? Won't we? One day when we're older I'll be yours and you'll be mine, be happy, happy. Oh, you say someday when we're older we won't worry about the things that we don't need. We don't need. One day down the line before we both run out of time, we're gonna see that someday we'll be all that we need. Oh, someday we'll be all that we need. Someday when we're older we'll be shining like we're gold, yeah, won't we? Won't we? Someday down the line before we both run out of time, we're gonna see that someday we'll be all that we need.
Someday when we're older, we'll be shining like we're gold. Well, that's what we're going after in this brand new series, In Pursuit of a Love That Lasts. And whether you're currently married, or if you want to be married, or if you're single or single again, we're continuing to explore the kind of love that's bigger and brighter and more intense than we can imagine. So, welcome to Crosspoint. We're excited to have you join us today. My name's Kerr, and we want you to know that you're joined with hundreds of other people right here at Crosspoint in person as well as online. And if this is your first time with us, we would love to connect with you. One of the best ways to do that is through the digital connection card. So if you text this keyword to this number, you'll receive a link to a form, and you can just include your name and your email, and we'll keep you in the loop on everything around here. And if you share with us your mailing address, we'll drop you a gift in the mail this week, simply as a way of saying thank you for joining us today. Now, if you've been with us before, we would love to hear from you as well. Now, if you like what you experienced this weekend, we would love to see you again. In fact, here is the Crosspoint Big 3 on how you can connect over these next few weeks. First of all, we've got a really cool Go project happening right now, providing school supplies and backpacks for over 400 of our high school friends at Village Project Africa in Kenya, Africa. For just $25, you can provide an entire year's worth of school supplies, and here's how you can do that from where you're at right now. At the top of your browser, or if you go to the Crosspoint app, there's a Give button, and you can donate $25, and in the designation, choose Village Project Africa, and you will fund one backpack. Now, you can fund 5 backpacks, you can fund 10 backpacks if you'd like, and you need to know that 100% of this donation goes to providing school supplies, and you can know that you're making a difference on the other side of the world right here from wherever you are, and you still get to sleep in your own bed tonight. How cool is that? Now, if you're newer to Crosspoint and you're interested in finding out more more about who we are, where we're going, how to get connected around here, or if you just have some questions, I want to invite you to join us for Explore Crosspoint on Sunday, May 15th at 11:45 right here at the Crosspoint campus. We'll have a light lunch, childcare will be provided, and we would love to see you. You can let us know your interest under what's happening on the connection card or on the Crosspoint app. And then last, parents, we've got some baby child dedications coming up May 12th and 15th in all of our weekend services. If you'd like to find out more about baby child dedications, just let us know on your connection card, or again, you can do that on the app or the web under what's happening, and we'll send you some information on some info meetings coming up where you can find out more. Now, one last thing, you're not going to want to miss this. Next weekend is a big holiday weekend, and if you're looking for an opportunity to check out the in-person experience here at Crosspoint, next weekend is going to be awesome. So this upcoming Thursday is Cinco de Mayo, and we're going to be having a Cinco de Mayo after party after the early weekend service out on the front porch, along with chips, salsa, and margaritas for the adults, of course. It's going to be lots of fun. And then Sunday is Mother's Day, and on Sunday we're going to be bringing back the cold brew coffee cart, and we're going to have free cold brew Hawaiian lattes for everybody on Mother's Day weekend. So join us next weekend, bring the whole crew. It's going to be fantastic. Now, that's a lot to remember, but if you get our weekly email, it'll all be there in your inbox. And if you don't, be sure to let us know on your connection card. And we would also love you to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you won't miss any of the action. Well, hey, we've got a great service today. As we've been saying over the last few weeks, we know falling in love is easier, at least easier, but staying there, man, that is an entirely different deal. Because we take all of our hopes and our dreams and our desires into our relationships, and our fiance, our partner, our spouse brings all of theirs with them. So what do we do with all these? Well, we're going to talk about that today. So let's head to the venue. Let's get started.
Well, hey, welcome here to Crosspoint. If we've not had a chance to meet you, my name is Chris, one of the pastors here at Crosspoint. So excited to have you guys joining us. We're in part 2 of this series called In Pursuit of a Love That Lasts. And, you know, we can kind of laugh about that, but the reality is, when it comes to marriage, we all walk in with these hopes, these dreams, these desires of what marriage is going to look like, what our relationship is going to look like. And we all walk in with this box of things. And so to kind of recap where we are, and we're in part 2 of this series, to kind of recap last week, we all come in with these things in mind, these things that we hope that as we move towards maybe engagement or move towards the altar or wedding day, we hope that these things will be true. And even if you're single, maybe you're not dating someone right now, the reality is, if I made you could put together a list right now. You might say, Chris, you know, I don't have a list. I mean, I don't really have these things. Now, the reality is we all have some hopes, some dreams, some desires of what we expect a relationship to look like. And the problem is, or maybe more so the challenge is that when we daydream about the future, it really begins to organize itself just around our box. And when I was single, I mean, to put it this way, I never daydreamed about becoming the person for someone else. I actually just daydreamed about finding the perfect person for me. And you're probably just like me, right? I'm sure I'm not the only one that's done that or that does that. And so, you know, Hannah and I, when we were walking towards maybe a little bit further into our relationship, deciding we're going to get engaged and headed towards marriage, you know, I had a box. So I brought the ring and my box with me to the wedding day. And the thing is, everything in my box, it seems to make perfect sense to me. Everything in my box is perfectly reasonably me. Why would anyone not want to center their lives around the things that are in my box, like the places that I want to travel, or how much money we're going to make, or how we're going to handle conflict? I mean, why wouldn't anyone want to do exactly what I want to do, right? And the reality is, Hannah, my wife, when she walked into our marriage, when she met me at the altar that day, she had her own box too. And the reality is true for you if you're married. You have your box and your spouse has their box as well. And we have this preferred future that we hope to create. Or maybe if you had an incredible childhood with great parents and incredible grandparents, maybe you want to recreate this preferred future that you saw. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe your growing up years, maybe the relationships you saw were just absolutely horrible. And so in your mind, your box of hopes, dreams, and desires is more of I want to look nothing like what I saw as a child. But either way, we try and shape this future, and we bring these expectations to the person that we're in relationship with. But when we exchange our box, We begin negotiating with one another. We begin bargaining with one another. And really, we begin kind of bribing each other. And eventually, it's characterized by what we talked about last week, about this debt-to-debtor relationship. This you owe me this, or no, you owe me this. That's what husbands are supposed to do in a marriage. That's what a wife is supposed to be like. That's how we should relate to each other relationally. And the next thing you know, you're just negotiating back and forth, and you're bickering and you're fighting. And the problem is, like we said last week, when you get to this point of the dynamic, when your relationship reaches this point, you can't even recognize love anymore. Now let me illustrate it this way. All right, so picture this. You owe me some money, right? You owe me some money. Wouldn't this be nice if that was real money? Not real money up here, not real money. You owe me some money. The reality is, if you owe me money and then you come up and you say, hey, Chris, I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you this money, but you actually owe me 2 of these? You only give me 1? Well, my next question is going to be, first off, you owe me that money. You're not giving it to me. I'm not receiving that as a gift. No. The reality is, I'm seeing that as something that I'm owed. And then my next question is, well, where's the rest of it? Where's the rest of it? You might say, Chris, I really appreciate you. Here's this stack of hundreds. Well, you owe me 2 stacks of hundreds. Where's the rest of the money? And now, not only am I'm not grateful, I don't even see it as a gift. My next question is going to be that, like, where's the rest? And so consequently, the gratitude that you're going to experience, the gratitude that you're going to get from me, it's going to be really minimal. And so in a relationship that has become a debt-to-debtor type relationship, as long as somebody feels like someone owes them something, they'll never receive it as love. And the other person, they can't even begin to extend love. And so the question that we're going to ask today, how do we keep from turning these things from hopes, dreams, and desires to expectations? The question that we're going to ask today is, how do we keep this from happening? I mean, because these are legitimate hopes. These are legitimate dreams and desires for your life, for your preferred future that you've created. But how do we keep them from becoming expectations? And the answer is this, that we answer the following question the way that happy couples answer this question. And the question is this, is what does he owe me? Or what does she owe me? And happy couples that are in pursuit of one another, that are pursuing a love that's going to last, they answer this question the exact same way. They answer it just like this. They owe me nothing. They owe me absolutely nothing at all. They know that they owe each other everything, but in return, they're expecting nothing back. They're owed nothing in return, which granted, honestly, it doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, you might hear that, you might think that, and you're like, well, Chris, like that's just not reality. That doesn't make any sense at all. But as you get to know couples that are really happy, that have peace, that have joy, that are excited to be together, there's something about their relationships that honestly they don't make sense, do they? Now this is the essence, or this is really the substance of what a Christian marriage is all about. Now, I know, I'm sure there are some of you watching online, some of you sitting here in the seats, and you hear me say a Christian marriage, and you're immediately kind of just checking out. Because you saw what you were told was a Christian marriage your entire life growing up, and you watched the fighting, you watched the bickering, you watched the you owe me, and you realize, if that's what a Christian marriage looks like, I want nothing to do with it. Which, when we talk about a Christian marriage here today, what we're talking about is this like taking from your hopes, your dreams, and desires and trying to not allow them to become expectations. Now, I don't know how you were raised or what your background is, but a Christian marriage is not one that's conducted according to this code of conduct. There is no like code of conduct for a Christian marriage. Great relationships, they're not built on specific codes of conduct. And honestly, they're not even really built on specific roles. They're not even built. A great relationship, it's not built on this exchange of goods and services. Great relationships, and a Christian marriage in particular, as Kurt said last week, it just boils down to this. It's a competition of submission. It's a race to the back of the line with your partner, with your spouse. It's this great relationship, this healthy relationship. And instead of there being a competition towards each other, instead of bargaining or negotiating or bickering, there's this sense of, well, I know that she doesn't owe me anything, that he doesn't owe me anything. But I feel like I owe her everything. Now today, I want to explain where we learn this, where this whole idea comes from. So here's the story. It's at the end of Jesus' ministry. He's got his guys there together. They're in the upper room. They're sharing this last Passover meal together. And Jesus, he's gathering them around and he's saying to them, guys, I've got something that I want you to make sure you remember. I've got something to share with you that you really need to write this down. You need to take note of this because what I'm about to say is absolutely transformational. So they're sharing this meal together. They're right at the end. And Jesus, he says this. He says, a new command I give you, to love one another as I have loved you. So you must go and love one another. Now this right here, I mean, this is a big moment. This is a big moment. Jesus, he's boiling down, 600 some odd Jewish laws, Old Testament laws, and he's really making it just to this one thing right here. That at the end of the day, these are your marching orders when it comes to relationships. That you are to treat other people the way that I have treated you, Jesus says. And honestly, he could have gone around the room right there in that moment. Right after sharing this, he could have gone around the room and gone to each of the disciples and said, like Matthew, listen, do you remember where you were when we first started having this conversation? Do you remember what your life looked like, Matthew? And I'm sure Matthew's thinking like, yeah, I remember. I mean, I was a tax collector. I mean, Jesus has got to think like, listen, Matthew, you were an embarrassment to your family. You were an embarrassment to your people, to your community. I mean, you were an absolute embarrassment. And yet, Matthew, do you remember what I said to you right then in that moment? And if you know the story, you know what Jesus said. He asked him right there in that moment. He asked him to follow him. And Peter's in the room. He's sitting there. And Jesus could turn to look at Peter and say, Peter, do you remember how you didn't want Matthew to come? How you didn't want to be associated with Matthew at all? You didn't want a tax collector in our group. You were so adamant that was not something that we needed, that was something that we should kind of turn from and be away from. And I'm sure in that moment, Peter's just like, oh, yeah, I remember how I responded. And the reality is, Jesus, as he looks at all of these guys, as he goes from all individual guy, one across the other, Jesus, what he's telling them in this moment is like, do you remember how I treated you? What I want you to do now is to take that and for the rest of your life, for every person, every individual, every relationship you have from here on out, I want you to extend that kind of grace, that kind of mercy to every single person that you meet for the rest of your life. And just a few hours later, Jesus would be arrested, and then he'd be tried, and then he would eventually be crucified. And that would be, in just a few days, it would be that aha moment for these guys, from honestly which they could never recover, because they realized that Jesus actually, he gave his life on their behalf, on my behalf, and he's asking us to do the same for other people. And that's why sometimes this is called the law of Christ. But let's call it the platinum rule, okay? I mean, we all learn the golden rule in school, right? Everybody learned the golden rule in school. I mean, treat other people the way that you want to be treated. Well, the platinum rule is to treat people the way that God, through Jesus, treated you. In fact, if you're not sure how to remember this, if you want to maybe just create a little memory here for when you're not sure what to say or do, you just love like God through Jesus loved you. When you got an argument that's happening in your relationships, when you got an issue with your boss or with your next door neighbor who still hasn't cut the grass, like I'm that next door neighbor right now, that my grass is just, it's out of control, but I just chalk it up to, well, we got babies, right? So I don't have to get to that, right? I'll get to it eventually. Maybe you got a relationship and you're wondering, how do I go about this relationship? How do I have a conversation with this person? Well, if you're not sure what to say or do, you just love like God through Jesus loved you. I mean, that's it. That's it. I mean, how did God through Jesus treat me when I was misbehaving, when I messed up, when I broke a promise? So this right here, this is huge. I mean, this is a big one. This is the marching orders. Every single New Testament imperative after the resurrection of Jesus, it tees up off of this idea. As I have loved you, you are to go and to love other people. And then just a few years later, there was this guy named the Apostle Paul. We talk about the Apostle Paul all the time around here because he hated Christians. He went after them. He chased them down. He arrested them. He tried to kill them. He tortured them. The Apostle Paul was as far from a Jesus follower as there could be. And then he had this experience where he met Jesus on the road to Damascus, and it changed everything for him. And so he became a follower of Jesus. And when he does, his life, it's completely transformed. He takes this big idea of loving others the way that God, through Christ, has loved you. And he takes this idea and then he begins to apply it in all of his letters that he writes to the Gentiles. Not like the Jewish people, but the letters to these churches all throughout the Mediterranean Rim. He begins to apply all of these things to all the different types of relationships, but specifically, as we're going to look at today, specifically to marriage. So whenever you read anything that the Apostle Paul writes, whenever he's writing in letters these things that say to do this or to not do that, do this and not do that, here's what you need to remember. Every one of his commands, it's linked specifically and directly to Jesus' command right here, to treat others the way that I have treated you. He's not making this stuff up. He's applying Jesus' brand new command in this moment. So in his letter, he's writing to the church in Ephesus, to the letter to the Ephesians, the Apostle Paul. He takes this command right here that Jesus offers, and he applies it to marriage. And here's what he says. He says, wives, submit yourself to your own husband as you do to the Lord. What could be any clearer than that, right? Now if this bothers you, if you're sitting here in the room, you're watching online right now, if you read that and you just kind of bristle a little bit, like a cat, hairs on the back of your neck just kind of stand up, I understand. I really do. I understand. And honestly, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're watching online right now. And I want you to lean in, because if this bothers you, you are in the right place right now. And I'm just going to leave it up. I'm just going to let it bother you for a minute right here. In fact, some of you might say, that's why I quit going to church. That right there, that's why I don't like Christians. That's why I don't like the church. That's why that whole idea of why I don't like Jesus followers. I'm so glad that you're here, that you're watching today. Because I'm telling you, what you're about to hear next, it's incredibly transformational. You see, our English Bibles, they're translations from Greek and Hebrew text. And the oldest manuscripts of the Apostle Paul's letter to this church in Ephesus, if you take this verse right here and you translate it literally, here's what it would say. It would say this. It would say, wives, to your own husband as you do to the Lord. In the oldest manuscripts, there's no verb. The word submit, it's not there. Now, before I explain why it's not there, I want to explain to something else to you. And this is really important. When the Apostle Paul, when he's talking about this, when he says, wives, submit to your own husbands as you do to the Lord, when he's sharing this with his first century audience, they hear that and they don't bristle. They hear that and they immediately understand. They probably hear that and they think, well, Paul, move on. Say something that we don't already know. Of course, we know how this works. This didn't surprise anyone in Paul's first century audience. And ladies, believe it or not, no one was offended, because men in that culture, both the Roman and the Greek culture, men in that culture had something that's referred to as patria potestas. And patria potestas, right here. This was these two words put together. This is that men had legal jurisdiction over their children and over their wives. Legal jurisdiction. That was just commonplace. And so when Paul's sharing this with this first century audience, they're probably thinking, Paul, move on. We already know that. We've already heard that. So when he's saying, wives, submit to your husbands, they're thinking, well, yeah, of course, right? We know that. And if we didn't, he would sell us. He would trade us. He would have us arrested. He would accuse us of some crime that we couldn't even say that we didn't do, because our words were worth nothing in court. Of course, Paul. Of course we submit to our husbands. So this was not a big deal to them. But here's the cool thing. It is a big deal to us. And the reason why it's a big deal to us, it actually comes a little earlier. So why is there no verb in the earliest Greek text? The answer is, it's actually pretty simple. I mean, this was pretty commonplace, that in the Greek writing, in the Greek text, there was this Greek grammatical way of doing things where you would just take the verb from the verse before, from the line before, and you would infer it onto the next one. And so we should ask, well, what was that verse that comes right before this? And listen, lean in. This is a game changer. This verse that we're about to look at together, this should make you smile. This is the game changer. If you're here right now, if you're watching online, lean in right here. This is the verb right here. It's submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. There it is again. Every time Paul's writing, every time the Apostle Paul tells us to do something, he points it back to Jesus. Not to the Old Testament, not to the Ten Commandments, but actually to Jesus. As God, through Christ, has done something extraordinary for you, you are to demonstrate that same kind of love in your relationships with one another, including your marriage. You are to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. In other words, the submission that we read in the next verse, it's mutual. This is why a Christian marriage is a submission competition. It's a race to the back of the line because of this command right here to submit. It's mutual. It is mutual submission. People, listen. If you don't hear anything else today, this is what makes a marriage amazing. This is what happy couples know. They know that I'm here for you and you're here for me. But I'm just here for you because you are here right in this moment. That I am here for you, not because you owe me anything, but because I owe you everything. I'm just here for you because God was here first for me, that when I needed my Heavenly Father. And so mutual submission, if you want to know what it looks like practically, mutual submission is this. It's I'm going to leverage all of me for what most benefits you. I'm going to leverage all of me for what benefits you, for what benefits your life the most. Now, we may have different roles, we may have different responsibilities in our relationships, but we do not, now listen, we do not have different value. I'm telling you, in the first century, for Paul to say this, I mean, this is unheard of. This is unbelievable. In the first century, and the reality is Jesus is the model here. So what Paul does is, it's brilliant. Paul, at the beginning, he's making this very disruptive application, and he's about to make this very disruptive point. So what he does is he brings everyone to the common ground. He brings everyone to the common ground. You know, wives, submit to your husbands. That was common. Everyone knew that. Everyone expected that because everybody knew that a wife had to submit to her husband. And so he begins, submit yourself to one another out of reverence for Christ. He begins where the common ground is, and then he goes on from there. And he applies it only to men. Here's what he says: wives, submit yourself to your husbands as you do to the Lord. Now when we see this, and ladies, I get this. Wives, I get this. If you're watching this, you're probably thinking, submit to your husband. What about all the men? What about all the men that aren't worth submitting to? So quick survey. I did a quick survey this week. I found that 100% of men are not worth submitting to, okay? 100% of men. I mean, none of us are worth submitting to. And so the point is, ladies, going back to Paul, his point is this, that I want you to place your husband or your man that you're moving towards a permanent relationship with. I want you to place your man's hopes, his dreams, his desires ahead of your own. I want you to deal out of his box, not out of your own. Not because he expects it, but because your Heavenly Father is requesting it. But what comes next is, this is the shocking piece. What came next had this effect on the audience that mimics the way that we feel when we see wives submit to their husbands. What comes next right here is why it was so offensive. The reason that we're so offended oftentimes by wives submit to your husbands is because of what the Apostle Paul asked husbands to do. And so this is what he says to the husbands. He says, husbands, love your wives Now, if we just stop right there, we're like, well, yeah, I mean, we know that. Like, obviously, I'm doing a wedding this weekend. I'm going to have a bride and groom standing in front of me. We're going to talk about this. And the reality is, you see that, you hear that, and you think, well, yeah, I mean, Chris, of course. Like, that's just what you do, right? But for Paul, saying this to his first century audience, that's just not what you do. In the first century, it wasn't, well, of course. It was like, wait. I don't have any obligation to my wife. My wife has an obligation to me. And the Apostle Paul says, look, I'm not finished yet. Husbands, love your wives just as, and this is the key. This is the connection. This is the link right here. The two words that anytime you read the New Testament, anytime you read a letter from the Apostle Paul, look for these two words, just as. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. And he gave himself up for her. Now, for the audience in Paul's church in Ephesus, in this church in the city, they're Christians. They're Jesus followers. So when Paul says this, when Paul writes this and they're reading it, when they see this, I'm sure all the men in the audience start to just pause and take a step back and think, well, wait a second. We know what happened to Jesus. We know how the story ends. This does not end well for Jesus. I know where you're going, Paul, and okay, we get that wives, they should submit, but because they kind of have to, but you're telling us now that we actually have a responsibility to them? Do we have to be responsible towards our wives? That somehow you're inferring that maybe there's even a sense of equality between men and women? Like, Paul, where are you going here? And the thing is, we know where he's going. Jesus, he died for the church. And Paul, he's still not done. He says, in the same way, husbands, they ought to love their wives as their own body. He's saying, okay, maybe this is too much for you. Maybe I'm equating just too much. Maybe I need to make this really simple for you guys. You are to love your wife. You are responsible to care for your wife, to protect your wife as if she is you. And for his first century audience, I mean, this is more than they can even begin to imagine. And he says this, he says, he who loves his wife loves himself. And Paul, what are you talking about here? They're hearing this, they're reading this, and they're thinking, that is not how this thing works, Paul. Like, I'm not sure if you really understand this, but that is not how this works. Because there's this mystery, though. There's a mystery that when two people are married, they become one flesh. And so there's no division. There's no pulling away. They are one. Men, your wives are one with you. I'm telling you, maybe as many times as you've heard that, as strange as it sounds and as biblical as it may be, this was brand new. This was brand new because what they're doing is they're equating men and women. They're putting on the same platform. And this right here, this is scandalous. It's why I said that what comes next is why the first thing made us feel so offended. The reason, and listen, if you're not a Christian, maybe you walked away from Christianity, maybe you walked away from the church because you saw the way that husbands treated their wives, and you thought, I want nothing to do with it. If that's what that means, I don't want to be a part of it. And I'm sure you've got good reason. I'm sure if I was you, had I read the same things that you read, had I heard the same things, went to the same school where you went to school, or experienced the things at a different church, whatever it is, I get it. But I want you to hear this because this next thing it's so powerful. The reason that we bristle when we hear the words, wives, submit to your husbands, is because in our culture, in our Western culture, we embrace the equality of men and women. We embrace the equality. And so the minute that we hear somebody is supposed to submit to somebody else, we're like, oh, I mean, right? We're like, oh, like that. This is absurd. That's not how this works. But ladies, listen, this is amazing news right here. Do you know who introduced the idea of equality to the world? Do you know who rolled it out in such a way that had such a platform that he could make a difference in culture by rolling this out? Guess who was the first person who had the authority, who declared that men and women were equal? Well, it was Jesus. I'm telling you, I might be naive here. I might be. I probably am. But I think that every single woman should be a Jesus follower. if for no other reason than this. I mean, he argued for your value. He argued for your worth. He argued for your dignity before it was even a category for anybody else in the world. Jesus argued for you. And the Apostle Paul, he comes along and he says, men, because of the way that your heavenly Father views the women in your life, you are to treat them with extraordinary value. I'm telling you, the dignity, the value, the worth that Jesus gave women. And ladies, just read the Gospels. If you're not sure, dig into the Gospels. First 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Women, they flocked to Jesus. They supported his ministry. They raised money for his ministry. They were the first persons to actually see him risen after the resurrection. Listen, I'm telling you, that was extraordinary. Jesus, he gave women extraordinary dignity because a woman's word, it was meaningless in court. And yet the Gospels, they tell us that women were the first people to see Jesus that day after the resurrection. And do you know why we read that in the Gospels? Because that's what happened. Women were the first ones to see Jesus when he rose. I mean, if you're making up that story, you would never write it that way. It was worthless. A woman's word was worthless in court. Their testimony wasn't worth anything, but yet that's exactly what happened. That's why it's written that way. This right here, this is life-changing. And so Jesus, he rolls this out. And the Apostle Paul, he kind of pumps it up. And then he says, I know that you weren't surprised when I said that women, you're supposed to submit to your husbands. But listen, men, women, right here, that in God's eyes, you're equal. You are equally valued. So you should submit. You should submit to one another. And granted, it took the church a little while to catch up. And there are some places where it's still taking the church a little while to catch up. There are some places, and the reality is, don't be deceived by this. I mean, our society, we value men, we value women equally, and that seems normal, but there are places all around the world where that is still not normal. And I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And so back to Paul. What's his point? His point is this, that men, let me ask you a question. What is life to you? I mean, what brings you life? What do you enjoy? What do you just love doing? What do you wake up in the morning and you can't wait to get out the door? What is life to you? And so Paul, he asked that question. Okay, man, well, what's life to you? And here's this point. Put her before that. Whatever that thing is, whatever life is to you, just put her before it. And you can't do that as long as you've got this big box of expectations between you and her. And ladies, he would say, you can't love your husband. You can't submit to your husband as long as you're trying to mutually submit to one another, as long as you've got this box of expectations. This box of expectation that's sitting between you and him. And this is what happy couples know. They somehow know that they have to get rid of all of this and become all that they are for the other person. And the answer to that first question of how do we get there? How do we get everything out of the expectations box? And how do we turn it back around to hopes and dreams and desires and leave it right there? The answer to that question, in terms of how you get everything back into the box, is you just simply decide, well, she doesn't owe me anything. That he doesn't owe me anything. I'm just deciding. I'm not feeling it. I'm just deciding right now, you don't owe me anything, but I owe her. I owe him everything. And for this to work, and here's the key. For this is going to frustrate you. I'm going to be really honest. For this to work, it's got to be mutual. Because he said, this is so powerful. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. This is oneness in a relationship. This is what it should look like. His best over yours, her best over yours. And if you're here today and you're just thinking, well, Chris, look, this would never work. I mean, you don't know what my relationship looks like. You don't know what our relationship looks like, but I'm just going to tell you right now, Chris, that's never going to work. That's never going to work. And if you're here today and you're thinking that, you might as well not even try. You might be thinking that right now. Well, I just want to challenge you. If you're a Jesus follower If you're someone who's trying to follow Jesus more closely and know him more intimately, if you're following after him, well, picture it like tug of war, right? Relational tug of war. You're always pulling, you're always fighting, my way, not her way, his way. Now, you're always doing this. Well, if you're a Jesus follower, I want to encourage you right now, just let go of your side of the rope. Just let go of your side of the rope. And I'll tell you why. Because when you were dead in your sin, God, through Jesus, dropped his end of the rope. I mean, he did something for you. Whether or not you ever did anything in response for what he did. This right here, I mean, this is the gospel. This is why all of the New Testament after the resurrection, this is why all of it ties back to as God through Christ did for you. And now you might be thinking, Chris, listen, well, they're not going to drop their side. What if they never drop their side? Well, Chris, you have no idea. I mean, the tension that we feel. What if they never let go? What if it's one-sided? Well, I would say to you again, drop your side. Trust him with it. Take a step out. And this is an all skate. If you want to have a relationship that's truly in pursuit, if you want to find out how to live the way that happy couples live, this is how you start. You submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. At the cross, God went first. So Jesus followers go first. Couples in pursuit, they put each other first by going first in an effort to be last, by racing to the back of the line. Jesus followers, they put each other first every single time. So as we wrap up, I want you to go ahead and stand. I got a couple of really quick next steps that I'd love you to begin to do this week. I want to challenge you with these this week, that whatever this looks like in your relationship, to just drop your side of the rope. The tension, the fighting, the back and forth. Just try this week. Drop your side of the rope and race to the back of the line. Race to the back of the line. And as Brad and the band sing this last song, as maybe you're here today, you're questioning this. You're feeling like maybe you can or you should move on this. As we sing this last song, my prayer is that maybe this would be a moment where you commit, that you take a step towards the back of the line relationally. And you drop your side of the rope. Let's pray. God, today, I know when you hear this, when you hear these words, when you walk through these things, God, it doesn't sound easy. God, and it's not. It's not. It requires trust, God. So I pray for anyone in this room, anyone that's watching online within the sound of my voice right now, God, I pray that they would trust you with this, that they would see that in order to be in pursuit truly of one another, that they've got to take a step out and drop their side of the road. It's in your name. Amen.
Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Oh. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down. Every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Take off the crown of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Take off the crown of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Take off the crown of all my tradition, break down the wall of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. Take off the crown of all my tradition, break down the wall of all my religion. Your way is better. Your way is better. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Here is where I lay it down. You are all I'm chasing now. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down. You are all I'm chasing now. This is my surrender. This is my surrender.
Well, hey, I hope today was perhaps a lay down your rope moment. Maybe this is a mark the moment day for you, and this is a change in trajectory in your relationship. So, we're excited you joined us. Hit send on that connection card so we can hear from you. If you would like prayer today, just text the keyword "need prayer" to the number right there on the screen. A member of our prayer team will give you a call here very, very soon. Now, next week, you're not going to want to miss part 3 of In Pursuit of a Love That Lasts. And we hope to see you either Thursday for the Cinco de Mayo after party, or we'd love to see you Mother's Day. And we're going to have some Hawaiian lattes with cold brew next week. Thanks for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you very soon.